There comes a moment when the noise of this world quiets just enough for you to hear it. That soft, trembling whisper in your soul. It's not fear, not guilt, not the echo of your mistakes. It's God calling you home. Calling you away from what's killing your peace, what's dimming your fire, what's making you forget who you are. You've tried to hold on, haven't you? To people who don't see your worth, to habits that promise comfort but leave you emptier each time, to dreams that stopped breathing long ago. Yet even in your running, God has been walking beside you. Not to condemn you, but to remind you that He still has something sacred for you, something pure, something whole. When He says a step away, it's not to take from you, it's to save you. To strip away what's false so He can restore what's eternal. You were never meant to drown in what you were meant to walk away from. So pause, breathe, listen. This moment is holy ground, the space between who you were and who God is calling you to become. I'll stay till the end, share this message, and remember, when God speaks, your life begins to change. There comes a moment when everything in your life grows still. Not peaceful stillness, but the kind that feels like the air before lightning. You can sense something shifting, though nothing around you has changed. It's the kind of silence that makes the heart tremble, because deep down, you know heaven is trying to speak. You've been running so long, chasing distractions that promise comfort but never deliver peace. Yet now, in this holy hush, God is near. Not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in the whisper that asks for your attention. You feel it in that unease that won't leave you. You sense it in the restlessness that no new beginning can satisfy. You hear it in the quiet corners of your soul, that soft, unwavering nudge. This isn't where you're meant to stay. And though you try to ignore it, deep within, you know that God is preparing you, that the whisper is not meant to frighten you, it's meant to awaken you. It's His mercy arriving before His movement, His love coming before His correction. The whisper is always gentle, because God doesn't force your surrender. He invites it. He could shake your world, and sometimes He will, but before He ever does, He offers a choice: to listen, to turn, to lay down the thing that has kept your soul heavy and your spirit weary. The storm only comes when the whisper is ignored, and when it does, it doesn't come to destroy. It comes to cleanse. But oh, how tender God is that He whispers first. You might think you're feeling anxious. You might call it confusion. But sometimes what you call unrest is heaven's way of stirring your spirit to move. You've prayed for direction, for signs, for clarity, and now, here it is. Not written in thunder, but breathed into your heart like a secret between you and God. When He whispers, it's never just information. It's an invitation. A call to realign, to return, to release. You see, God's whisper always arrives before His rearranging. He gives you the chance to step away from what's not meant for you before it crumbles. He lets you sense the decay before it becomes a disaster. The relationship that no longer carries peace, the habit that drains your joy, the path that keeps you stuck. These are the places where God begins to whisper. He says to step back now before the weight of it breaks you. It's not judgment. It's mercy dressed in stillness. But you wrestle, don't you? You tell yourself you can handle it, that it's just a rough season, that you'll change later. You silence the whisper because you fear what obedience will cost. Yet what if what you call a cost is actually God's covering? What if the thing you're clinging to is the very thing He's trying to free you from? The whisper may feel inconvenient, but it is always kind. It's His voice guiding you out of what will soon become your storm. God knows how to protect His children even when they don't recognize the danger. And so He starts soft, a tug in your conscience, a fading peace, a conversation that no longer feels right. And if you still won't move, the whisper grows into wind, and the wind becomes thunder. Not because He's angry, but because He loves you too deeply to leave you in harm's way. The storm is His final attempt to get your attention. But if you listen to the whisper, you may never need to face the storm. There is a sacred mercy in those early moments when God quietly warns you, when He unsettles your comfort so He can prepare your heart. That is where transformation begins. Not in chaos, but in quiet conviction. The whisper is your rescue. The discomfort is your deliverance. Before God shakes what's around you, He stirs what's within you. And when you feel that stirring, don't run, respond, because his whisper is not a threat. It's a hand reaching out in love. You may not see what's ahead, but he does. He knows the waves that are forming, the doors that are about to close, the roads that will soon divide. And in his mercy, he gives you a chance to turn before the storm reaches you. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to stop fighting what God is trying to free you from. To let the whisper guide you out of the storm that your stubbornness would have invited. If you would just stop and listen, you'd realize the whisper is proof that he hasn't given up on you. It's his presence saying, I still have more for you. Every time you ignore it, the noise of this world grows louder and the voice of heaven grows faint. Not because God stopped speaking, but because you've stopped being still. And yet he never walks away. He waits patiently, lovingly, until you're ready to hear again. And when you finally do, when you pause long enough to feel that holy weight pressing on your heart, you'll understand the whisper was never meant to take something from you. It was meant to lead you back to the one who never stopped calling your name. It's his kindness disguised as conviction, his warning wrapped in love, his way of saying a come home before the rain begins. So when you sense that unease, when your peace begins to fade, don't fear it. Follow it. It's not chaos. It's not confusing. It's God moving gently before the storm. Because the whisper always comes before the wind, not to frighten you, but to save you. And those who learn to listen will find that the storm, when it finally comes, only washes away what was never meant to remain. There comes a season when the ground beneath your feet begins to feel hollow, not because you failed, but because the presence that once sustained you has moved. You can sense it before you understand it. The prayers that once burned with fire now echo without warmth. The work that once felt sacred now feels heavy, routine, lifeless. And deep within, a voice you've tried to silence begins to whisper, it's time to go. But leaving is not easy. You've built here memories, meaning even faith. You've told yourself this must be where God still wants you, because how could he ask you to abandon what he once blessed? Yet grace is not bound by geography. God's presence does not live in your nostalgia. What he anoints for a season, he may remove for the next. Staying where he has moved on is not loyalty. It's delay. There is a deep ache in outgrowing what no longer holds the presence of God. You can feel the life leaking from what once nourished you. You keep pouring effort into dry wells, hoping that one more prayer, one more act of willpower will bring the water back. But when God moves, no amount of striving can resurrect what he has already released. His silence is not punishment, it's direction. You can sense when grace has lifted, not because the circumstances worsen, but because your spirit does. The peace that once wrapped around you has quietly withdrawn. Conversations that once felt alive now leave you empty. The same place that once carried purpose now feels like a cage. That's how God tells you he's no longer here. He is not abandoning you. He is ahead of you, waiting in the next chapter you're afraid to open. It is painful, isn't it? To feel the unraveling of something that once carried so much of you, the relationship you prayed to sustain, the job that felt like a calling, the dream that once burned bright. You thought leaving would mean failure. But what if staying means disobedience? What if the very thing you're clutching is what's keeping you from the next breath of grace? When God moves, everything living within you begins to feel the pull. The spirit grows restless. The heart grows uneasy. What once fit perfectly now feels too small. And though you try to convince yourself you're content, you can feel it. The holy discomfort that won't let you settle. It's not anxiety. It's an invitation. The weight you feel is not punishment. It's the pressure of new wine that can no longer stay in an old skin. You see, God's mercy is too great to let you rot in comfort. His love will unsettle every false peace that keeps you stuck. He will let the brook dry up if it means leading you to the river that never runs out. But he will not drag you forward. He will wait, patient, steady, unchanging, until you choose to trust him enough to move. And there is always a cost to moving on. You will lose the approval of those who never understood your obedience. You will grieve the parts of yourself that found identity in what you're leaving behind. You will walk through nights where you question whether you've made a mistake. But deep down you'll know this is what obedience feels like. It's not always clarity. Sometimes it's the courage to walk into the dark, trusting that God is still there. Staying where he has moved on may feel easier, but it costs more than you realize. Every day outside his will drain your soul. Not in a sudden collapse, but in a quiet decay. Your prayers grow dull. Your joy thins. You start confusing stagnation for peace, when in truth, it's just fear wearing a calm face. That's the tragedy of disobedience. It doesn't always come with rebellion. Feeble. Sometimes it comes with routine. You can build an altar in a place God has already left, but no fire will fall. You can keep sowing in the same field, but the soil has hardened. You can pour out every ounce of yourself, but without his presence, your effort turns into exhaustion. God's power doesn't flow from your persistence. It flows from your positioning. If he has moved, you must move too. But when you do, when you finally take that trembling step away from what's familiar, you will find that he never left you. He simply shifted the meeting place. What felt like loss will unfold into peace. What looked like an ending will become the threshold of something new. And then that new space where his presence meets your obedience, you will breathe again. It will not happen instantly. You may wander for a while, unsure of where you are. But even in the wilderness, you will find whispers of grace, small reminders that you are not lost, just being led. And as you walk, you will begin to see the truth. The God who moved did not leave you behind. He invited you closer. Every act of obedience refines the soul. Every surrender carves room for greater glory. What you thought was an ending was simply God making space for his next miracle. He moves not to confuse you, but to continue you. You were never meant to build monuments around moments. You were meant to follow the movement of his presence, alive, breathing, uncontained. So when the peace fades, when the stillness grows heavy, when the voice within begins to whisper that your time here is done, listen. Don't cling to what's comfortable just because it's familiar. God's presence is not a place. It's a person. And he's already walking ahead, waiting for you to follow. You will find in time that obedience was never about loss. It was about life. Because every step away from where God has moved on is a step closer to where his glory is waiting. And when you finally reach that new ground, when the air feels lighter and your soul breathes freely again, you will understand it wasn't that he left you. It's that he loved you too much to let you stay. There are seasons when love feels less like a gift and more like a weight you can no longer carry. You wake up exhausted, not from hatred, but from holding on. The bond that once gave you life now drains it drop by drop. It began as something holy, maybe friendship, maybe romance, maybe family, but somewhere along the way it shifted. You can feel it, even if you can't explain it. The peace that once marked it is gone, replaced by guilt, by fear, by the heavy ache of trying to keep something alive that God has already released. You tell yourself it's love that keeps you there. You say you're being faithful, patient, understanding. But beneath those words is something truer. You're afraid of letting go, afraid of what their absence might expose in you. Afraid that walking away will make you the villain in a story you tried to write with grace. Yet deep within you know this isn't love anymore. It's an attachment dressed in loyalty. It's self-sacrifice disguised as virtue. It's you confusing suffering with holiness when in reality God is calling you to peace. You were never asked to become someone else's savior. That role was filled long before you took your first breath. Yet still you try to heal them, to fix them, to carry their storms as if your endurance could calm their waves. You think if you love them enough, they'll change. If you forgive enough, they'll wake up. But love without boundaries isn't love, it's captivity. And every time you rescue them from their consequences, you're keeping them from the very lesson that could save their soul. God's love never demands that you destroy yourself to prove your devotion. True compassion walks beside, it doesn't chain itself to another's chaos. There is holiness in helping, yes, but there is also holiness in stepping back. There's a sacred kind of mercy that says, I will no longer carry what you refuse to surrender. You can still love deeply and let go faithfully. In fact, sometimes letting go is the only way love survives. It's hard to see it that way at first. You'll wrestle with guilt, with memories, with the echoes of promises that now haunt more than heal. You'll remember the laughter, the beginnings, the reasons you stayed. You'll question your discernment. Wasn't this from God? Didn't I pray for this? Didn't he bless it once? And maybe he did. What begins in grace can end in growth. Not every love story is meant to last a lifetime. Some are meant to teach the heart how to discern. There are relationships that serve their purpose and then fade, not because of failure, but because you've both outgrown the season that required each other. Yet, when you cling beyond that purpose, the beauty turns bitter. What was once healing begins to harm. That's when God in His mercy begins to withdraw His peace. Not to punish you, but to remind you that His presence has moved. When you stay where grace is lifted, even love becomes a burden too heavy to bear. You're praying for restoration when God is offering release. That's when love becomes a chain. Not because it's evil, but because it's no longer aligned with purpose. You can't fix what was never yours to fix. You can't heal wounds you didn't cause. You can't make someone see the truth if they've chosen blindness. And still God asks you to love, but from a distance now. He calls you to bless without binding yourself, to forgive without returning, to wish them peace without sacrificing your own. This is maturity in love, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of wisdom. Love that honors God doesn't demand self-erasure. It does not silence your pain or call it humility. It does not require you to stay in what suffocates you just to prove your devotion. Sometimes love's truest expression is release, the kind that leaves your hands empty, yet your spirit free. The kind that says, I still love you, but I will no longer lose myself trying to save you. And when you finally do it, when you loosen your grip and let go, you will feel grief. Deep, honest grief, because endings always hurt, even when they're divine. But beneath that ache, something holy begins to stir. You'll start to breathe again. The tension in your chest will ease. The silence that once terrified you will become a sanctuary. You'll begin to realize that God wasn't just removing them, He was rescuing you. You will see over time that He never asked you to stop loving them. He simply asked you to stop letting that love imprison you. You can still pray for them. You can still hope for their healing. But you do it from freedom now, not bondage. You love them through God's hands, not your own. And in that surrender, you'll understand what love was always meant to be. Not control, not dependence, but trust. The love God calls you to is not one that delights. It's a love that multiplies peace instead of fear. It's a love that draws you closer to Him, not further into confusion. When love becomes a chain, He steps in not to end love, but to restore its purity. He loosens your grip, not because He's taking something from you, but because He's giving you back to yourself. In time, you'll look back and see how necessary it was. You'll see that what once felt like loss was really liberation. You'll thank God for the strength you didn't know you had, for the clarity that came through pain, for the courage to release what could no longer walk beside you. You'll realize that love was never meant to trap you in fear. It was meant to teach you freedom in faith. And when you reach that quiet peace, when the memories no longer sting and the silence no longer feels like absence, you'll feel it. The soft assurance that this was God's mercy all along, that He didn't just free you from them, He freed you for Him. There are moments in life when something sacred begins to lift. Not in anger, not in chaos, but in silence. You don't hear doors slam. You don't see the sky split. You just sense it. The stillness that used to soothe you now feels heavy. The warmth that once wrapped around you has turned cool, distant. It's hard to explain, yet you know something has changed. Grace has begun to leave. It's a quiet departure, almost imperceptible at first. The same routine continues. The same people, the same places, the same prayers, but the life in it is gone. You keep showing up, but your spirit doesn't breathe there anymore. What once felt holy now feels hollow. You think it's just fatigue, maybe distraction, but deep within you, a whisper begins to stir. It's time to move on. That's how grace leaves. Gently, mercifully, it doesn't rip away what you love, it releases it. Not because God is cruel, but because He refuses to let you build a home where He no longer dwells. His presence is not static. It moves like the wind, like the cloud that once led his people through the wilderness. When it lifted, they packed their tents and followed. Those who stayed behind were left with memories of miracles, but no presence of God. You can feel when grace begins to fade. Conversations that once felt easy now weigh you down. Work that once filled you with joy becomes heavy and forced. The peace that carried you through storms now feels like a memory. And though you try to push through, deep down, you know, the oil is running dry. It's not failure, it's transition. God is moving and he's asking you to follow. But that's the hardest part, isn't it? Because you love this season. You prayed for this job, this relationship, this place. You saw his hand in it once, and that memory keeps you holding on. You convince yourself that leaving would be disloyal, that staying means faithfulness. But there is a difference between faith and familiarity. God never asked you to cling to what he has already released. His blessings are meant to move with his will, not anchor you to what's ending. When grace begins to lift, it's not always visible. There's no lightning bolt and no sudden loss. Just a subtle shift. The laughter feels forced, the peace feels manufactured. The clarity that once guided you has dimmed. That's not a coincidence. That's a divine transition. The Spirit of God does not scream. He withdraws quietly, giving you space to recognize what he's doing. It's not rejection, it's redirection. And yet how often do you stay? Out of fear, out of guilt, out of hope that maybe the warmth will return if you just try harder. You keep pouring oil into a lamp God has already extinguished. You stay in rooms that no longer carry his presence, mistaking comfort for calling. But staying where grace has departed doesn't keep you safe. It keeps you stuck. The tragedy isn't that grace leaves. The tragedy is that we do not. Sometimes God has to let peace leave a place before we will. He'll let discomfort grow until you finally surrender. Because if he didn't, you would settle for less than his promise. You keep drinking from a well that ran dry long ago, convincing yourself that it's enough to survive when he's calling you to thrive. So in his mercy, he lets grace fade. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. The absence you feel is not abandonment. It's an invitation to follow him to where his presence still flows. You might not see it yet, but the lifting of grace is a form of protection. It's God's way of closing what your heart refuses to. If you stay, you'll start trying to manufacture what only he can sustain. You'll start calling routine obedience and confusion discernment. But the soul knows. The heart that listens recognizes when heaven has gone quiet. And when that happens, you have a choice to cling to what was or to step toward what's next. Leaving is never easy. It means facing the unknown, grieving what once was, and trusting that God's silence is not his absence. You'll wrestle with questions. Did I do something wrong? Did I miss his will? Why would he bless something only to take it away? But grace doesn't leave because you failed. It leaves because its work is done. Every season of favor has an expiration, not because God changes, but because his purposes unfold in chapters. What sustained you in one will suffocate you in the next. When God removes his peace from a place, he has already written his will. You can say, but the cost will be high. Your spirit will grow weary, your prayers will feel forced. The presence you crave will seem distant, not because he's far away, but because you're facing the wrong direction. You are meant to follow, not linger. The cloud has moved. The fire has shifted. The miracle you're waiting for isn't behind you. It's waiting in the next step of obedience. There will come a moment when you finally understand, when you stop fighting the emptiness and start listening to it, when you realize the ache in your chest isn't punishment, it's prophecy. It's God saying, I'm calling you somewhere new. And when you finally step forward, trembling but trusting, you'll feel it. That familiar warmth returning, that peace settling once more. The same grace that once carried you here is already waiting there. Grace doesn't vanish, it transitions. It moves from season to season, place to place, heart to heart. It doesn't leave you behind, it leads you onward. And one day when you look back, you'll see that it never truly left at all. It simply shifted shape, guiding you from what was temporary into what is eternal. The quiet exit of grace is not a loss, it's an invitation. It's God's way of saying you've grown here. It's time to grow again. Staying behind doesn't make you faithful, it only makes you late. For where his peace departs, his purpose has already moved. And when you finally follow, when you step into the new place he's been preparing all along, you'll discover something unshakable. Grace never leaves those who follow where it leads. It only changes form, carrying you from glory to glory, from yesterday's obedience into tomorrow's promise. There are moments when life splits open, and everything you thought was secure begins to crumble. The people you trusted vanish. The plans you built collapse. The prayers you prayed seem to echo into silence. You sit there in the ruins, heart trembling, and you ask the question every soul eventually whispers. Why, God? Why did you let this happen? But heaven often answers through silence. Not because God is cruel, but because pain has a language words cannot speak. There are truths so deep they can only be learned through breaking. You didn't know it then, but the pain that pierced you was not the end of your story. It was the hand of God rescuing you from a place you would never have left on your own. Every wound you've wept over, every betrayal, every night you held yourself together in the dark was not punishment. It was deliverance wearing the disguise of loss. God let certain hearts shatter yours because if they hadn't, you would have stayed bound to what was slowly killing your spirit. He allowed certain doors to slam shut because if they hadn't, you would have walked straight into destruction, smiling all the way. Pain has always been one of heaven's sharpest tools. It carves away illusions, breaks open pride, and exposes what comfort has hidden. It doesn't come to destroy you, but to deliver you from everything that keeps you small. When you begged God to use you, when you prayed for purpose, you didn't know he would use pain to purify the calling. He doesn't waste your tears. He uses them to water what will one day grow in the place of your loss. There's a strange mercy in being broken, because in the breaking, the masks fall off, the noise dies down. You stop performing for acceptance. Stop pretending you're fine. Stop chasing people who were never meant to stay. Pain strips away everything false until all that remains is you, the raw, unguarded you always wanted to heal. You see, healing rarely begins with peace. It begins with pain that refuses to be ignored. God loves you too much to let your wounds stay hidden. He will surface what you've buried, not to shame you, but to free you. The discomfort you feel isn't punishment. It's exposure. The light entering what's been kept in the dark for too long. And though it burns, it is still grace. You may not understand this yet, but one day you will. One day you'll look back and see how every heartbreak was a rescue, how every disappointment was a redirection, how every unanswered prayer was protection. You'll see that God never abandoned you in your pain. He was present in it, shaping you through it, molding you with hands both tender and firm. Pain, when surrendered, becomes sacred. When you stop asking, why me, and start whispering, what are you teaching me? You begin to see the divine fingerprints even in your sorrow. The lesson isn't always immediate. Sometimes the healing takes months, years. But in every ache, there's a quiet invitation. Trust me. You may feel like you're walking through fire, but this isn't the fire that destroys. It's the one that refines. Gold doesn't complain when it's melted, it only becomes purer. In the same way, the pain you're enduring is not meant to end you, it's meant to awaken you. God is burning away what cannot last so that what is eternal can finally live. And yes, it hurts. It hurts to watch people leave who promised to stay. It hurts to see dreams dissolve into dust. It hurts to sit in the silence after years of answered prayer, nothing but emptiness. But even here, especially here, God is doing something holy. The emptiness you feel is the space He's clearing for His glory to dwell. There are wounds that look like endings, but are actually beginnings. You might not see it now, but every tear you've cried has watered the soil of tomorrow's joy. Every sleepless night has prepared you for the dawn that's coming. Pain doesn't mean you're abandoned. It means you're being transformed. The cross itself was proof of that. Agony turning into redemption, loss becoming life. What if the pain you've been running from is the very place where God wants to meet you? What if instead of fighting it, you leaned into it? Not with despair, but with surrender. Because pain resisted becomes bitterness, but pain embraced becomes wisdom. You can either let it harden your heart or let it humble you. And the moment you choose surrender over struggle, the healing begins. You've carried so much for so long, the weight of others' choices, the guilt of things you couldn't fix, the memories that still echo when the world grows quiet. You've tried to move on by forgetting, but forgetting is not healing. Healing begins when you allow the pain to teach you what comfort never could. That God is still good even when life is not. You will come to see that pain is not your enemy, it's a messenger. It comes to say you've stayed too long in what cannot hold you. It comes to remind you that the place where you're breaking is the same place God intends to rebuild. And though you feel like you're losing yourself, you're actually being remade, not weaker but wiser, not hardened but holy. There is a point in the journey where pain stops being something that happens to you and starts being something that grows within you. Not as bitterness, but as birth. You begin to see purpose in the wounds. You start to thank God not for the suffering, but for the strength that came through it. And you realize the tears that once felt endless have become the testimony that someone else will one day need. God never wastes pain. Every bruise, every betrayal, every heartbreak has purpose. He takes the ashes and molds them into altars. He takes the tears and turns them into oil. You won't always understand it in the moment, but you'll look back and realize that the pain you cursed was the doorway to everything you prayed for. Pain was never the punishment. It was the passage. The narrow road that led you out of self-reliance and into divine dependence. It stripped away what you thought you needed so you could find what truly matters, Him. And when you reach that still point where you can finally breathe again, you'll see the beauty in the breaking. You'll understand that what hurt you didn't destroy you, it delivered you. The world may never see the victory in your scars, but heaven does. Because each one is proof, not of what broke you, but of what saved you. And in that quiet realization, when you no longer need to explain or defend, peace will return. Not the fragile kind that depends on circumstance, but the eternal kind that flows from trust. That is when you will know pain was never the end, it was the door. And on the other side of that door, resurrection was waiting. There is a kind of silence that follows loss. The kind that doesn't echo, only settles. It wraps around you like fog, and though you breathe, it feels as though something inside has stopped moving. That is what letting go feels like. It's not a single act, it's a slow surrender. It's the trembling of fingers unclenching what they thought they couldn't live without. And it feels like death, because in a way it is. To let go is to bury the illusion of control. To admit that no matter how tightly you hold, life will still move as God wills. It's the most painful obedience, the kind that doesn't make sense while you're in it. Because the heart doesn't release easily. It remembers. It replays. Yet somehow, even through the ache, grace keeps whispering, it's time. Letting go isn't a punishment, it's a passage. It's how heaven makes room for resurrection. God never asks you to release something unless He intends to replace it with Himself. But that's not what you see at first. All you see is the empty space. The absence. The place where what you loved used to live. You look at your open hands and wonder if they'll ever hold something sacred again. That's where faith is born, in the hollow of surrender. Not when everything makes sense, but when nothing does, and still you choose to trust. You think you're losing captivity? You think you're breaking, but really you're being unbound. God is not taking from you, He's freeing you. There's a holy weight in this. A heaviness that presses but also purifies. Because to truly let go, you have to face what you've been clinging to. You have to admit how much you've built your worth around what's slipping away. The dream, the person, the plan, the identity you created out of fear. You thought if you held on tightly enough, it would stay. But what's meant to leave will leave, and what's meant to remain will never need your force to stay. Letting go is God's way of showing you that you were never the one holding it all together. He was, always. You just mistook His grace for your strength. And when He loosens your grip, He's not trying to hurt you. He's inviting you into truth. The truth that nothing eternal can ever truly be lost. Still, it hurts. The human heart was built to attach, to love, to hold close. And so when God asks you to release something you prayed for, something that once felt divinely given, it cuts deep. You mourn not just what's gone, but the version of yourself that existed when you still had it. You grieve the dreams that won't unfold the way you imagine. But grief itself is holy. It's proof that you love deeply. It's the sound of your soul making room for God's next miracle. You see, letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what was never yours to keep. It's releasing the illusion that you can fix, manage, or maintain what only grace can sustain. Faith isn't proven by what you hold. It's proven by what you release, and by how gently you do it. Because anyone can cling out of fear, only the faithful can open their hands and trust. And yet, God's request to let go often feels unfair. You gave everything, your heart, your effort, your prayer. And now you're asked to lay it down. You cry out, "Why give me something beautiful just to take it away?" But the truth is, He never took it away, He took it back. Every blessing you've ever received was borrowed from His goodness, meant to draw you closer to Him. When it has served its purpose, He calls it home. Sometimes He takes what you love to show you what you worship. Sometimes He removes what you thought you needed to reveal that He is enough. The letting go is never about loss. It's about learning dependence. God will remove the false anchors from your life so you'll finally discover that your security was never in the boat, but in the one who calms the sea. You will wrestle with this. You'll try to hold on longer than you should. You'll mistake delay for devotion. You'll pray for God to change what He's already closed. But eventually, the struggle will wear you out. And in that exhaustion, you'll find surrender. That's when the miracle begins. Because true surrender doesn't happen when you give up. It happens when you give over. When you finally lay it down, not because you have to, but because you trust Him more than your understanding, peace comes. Not all at once, but in quiet waves. The ache remains, but it softens. The silence no longer feels empty. It feels sacred. You start to sense Him again, not in the thing you lost, but in the stillness that followed. That's the mystery of letting go. You lose something temporal and gain something eternal. And it's then in that divine exchange that you see it clearly. Every goodbye that broke you also built you. Every tear carved space for grace. Every ending was God weaving eternity into your temporary pain. The breaking didn't destroy you. It revealed who was holding you all along. The cross itself was the greatest act of letting go. In that moment, heaven released what it loved most so that the world could be redeemed. It was grief and glory intertwined, death birthing life. That is the pattern of the kingdom. Resurrection always follows release. But you cannot resurrect what you refuse to let die. So when God asks you to let go, remember, He's not asking you to live. He's freeing you from the weight of what cannot follow you into what's next. And though the parting feels heavy, it is holy. Because in every loss, His hands are making room, not for emptiness, but for Himself. One day, you will look back and understand why it had to happen. You'll see how the things that left were never truly lost. They were transformed. You'll see how every surrender drew you deeper into His presence. You'll realize that the letting go was never the end of your story. It was the threshold of grace. And when you stand on the other side, healed, whole, quiet, you'll know nothing surrendered to God ever stays buried. It rises again in a different form, in a better time, in a holier way. The weight you carried was never meant to crush you. It was meant to sanctify you. Letting go will always feel like death, but in God's hands, death is never final. It's the soil where new life begins. There's a kind of pain that only comes from doing what's right. The ache that follows obedience. You never expect it at first. You think choosing God will bring peace. That surrender will make the path clear. But sometimes obedience breaks more than it fixes. It pulls you away from what's familiar, strips you of comfort, and leaves you standing in the silence between what you've lost and what's not yet revealed. Sin feels easier because it feeds what's dying. It soothes the flesh even as it poisons the soul. But obedience starves the flesh so the spirit can live. It hurts because it purifies, it cuts because it heals. And that cutting, that holy pain is what most people run from. You don't. You stay, you let God finish what He started, even when every part of you wants to turn back. There's a loneliness in choosing obedience. You'll feel it when the people you once walked with stop understanding you. You'll feel it when your heart breaks over the things you had to leave behind. You'll feel it when you stand in the middle of a quiet night, wondering if obedience was worth the cost. But even in that ache, heaven is nearer than it's ever been. God is not cruel. He's carving you into something that can hold His glory without breaking under it. Obedience always costs something. It cost Abraham his home. It cost Moses his reputation. It cost Jesus his life. So it should not surprise you that it costs you your comfort. It's the price of holiness. You may not see the reward right away. You may walk through years of silence and sacrifice, wondering why the very choice that honored God also wounded you. But pain is not proof of His absence. It's evidence of His refining. Sin gives quick pleasure but lasting chains. Obedience gives sharp pain but lasting freedom. One fills your hands for a moment, the other fills your soul forever. The world celebrates rebellion because rebellion feels powerful. But obedience, quiet, hidden, faithful obedience, that's the power heaven honors. It's not loud, it's not glamorous, it's steady. It's the kind that keeps saying yes when there's nothing left to hold on to except God Himself. Sometimes obedience will take you where logic cannot follow. It will make you walk away from what everyone else calls good. It will silence you when you want to defend yourself, humble you when you want to fight back, isolate you when you crave belonging. And yet, in that pain, something sacred happens. You become aligned with the heartbeat of God. You start to understand that obedience isn't about outcomes. It's about intimacy. It's about trusting His will more than your understanding. The reason obedience hurts more than sin ever did is because obedience kills what sin kept alive: pride, control, and comfort. It forces you to confront who you are without the things you cling to. It dismantles the idols you built to feel safe. It makes you face the fear you've been running from, the fear of surrender. But what feels like loss is really liberation. What feels like dying is actually deliverance. God does not take pleasure in your pain, but He delights in your trust. Every tear shed in obedience is seen. Every silent act of surrender echoes in eternity. The angels lean in close when you obey through tears because they remember the day you were found, the day heaven claimed you as one of its own. They know the cost. They see the beauty in what the world overlooks. You might wonder why obedience feels so lonely. It's because few are willing to walk this road. The narrow path has never been crowded. You'll pass through seasons where it seems like God has stripped everything familiar away. The friends, the security, the noise. It will feel cruel at first, but what He's really doing is creating space. Because obedience and distraction cannot coexist. And yet, even when it hurts, obedience carries a strange peace beneath the pain. You'll find it in the quiet moments, the stillness after the crying, the calm after the breaking. You'll realize that while sin left you empty, obedience, even in its ache, fills you with something eternal. You'll discover that the more you lose for Him, the more of Him you gain. The world won't understand this. They'll call your obedience foolish, your faith naive. They'll measure success by comfort, not by conviction. But the angels understand, heaven understands, and deep down, so does your soul. Because every act of obedience is a seed, one that blooms not in this life, but in eternity. You may never see its full harvest here, but one day you will. Until then, obedience will hurt. It will stretch you beyond what you think you can bear. It will lead you through nights where you question everything you thought you knew. But keep walking, because what you call pain, heaven calls preparation. What you call sacrifice, God calls sanctification. You're not losing, you're being refined. When it's all said and done, when the ache fades into understanding, you'll see that obedience was never about God trying to take from you. It was about Him giving you Himself. Every yes you whispered through tears was another stone laid on the path toward wholeness. Every time you stayed when it was easier to run, every time you trusted when it made no sense, those were the moments that shaped eternity. And when you finally stand before Him, you won't remember the pain. You'll remember the presence. You'll remember how in your obedience you met the heart of God. And you'll realize that obedience, though it broke you, also became the very thing that saved you. When the noise has faded, when the dust of broken dreams settles and the ache in your chest becomes quiet, that's when you start to feel it. The emptiness, the aftermath, the place where what you built lies in ruins. You look around and wonder how it came to this, how the things you prayed for, worked for, and believed in could crumble so completely. And for a while you sit among the wreckage, thinking maybe this is where your story ends. But it isn't, because even here, especially here, God is waiting. Not on the mountaintop of your victories, but in the ruins of what you thought would last forever. He waits where the light feels dim, and your voice has grown too tired to pray. Not to condemn, not to demand, but to restore. You may think he's disappointed. You may imagine him distant, silent, shaking his head at all the ways you've failed. But that's not his nature. God doesn't shame the wanderer. He goes after them. He doesn't scold the broken. He kneels beside them. His love doesn't vanish when you fall apart, it deepens. It finds its way through the wreckage, through the walls, through the distance you created in your running. And when you finally stop, when you finally turn around, you'll find him there. Not angry, but patient, waiting with eyes that still see who you are beneath all that's fallen away. You've lost things, haven't you? Pieces of yourself you thought would never break. Relationships that once felt eternal. A sense of purpose that's now buried under questions. You thought if you were strong enough, faithful enough, you could hold it all together. But you couldn't. And now all that's left are fragments. But what if the wreckage isn't a sign of God's absence, but his mercy? What if he allowed the collapse not to destroy you, but to bring you back to him? There are things he'll let fall apart because they were never meant to bear the weight you placed on them. He'll let idols crumble, even the good ones, the ones that look like blessings, so that your heart can learn what only loss can teach, that he was never gone, only waiting for your surrender. You may have lost everything, but you never lost him. Even when you walked away, his presence followed. Even when you cursed his silence, his mercy shielded you from what would have destroyed you completely. Even when you doubted his goodness, he was already planning your restoration. The world calls it failure, but heaven calls it redemption and progress. God doesn't need your perfection to perform a miracle. He just needs your return. The moment you turn back, even in brokenness, you'll find he's already closer than your next breath. The wreckage isn't the end. It's the soil from which grace grows. It's the ground where pride dies and dependence is reborn. You'll see that the pieces you thought were worthless are the very ones he'll use to rebuild. Not the same structure, not the same dream, something stronger, truer, eternal. But restoration takes time. You'll want to rush it. You'll want to rebuild before the foundation is ready. Yet God rebuilds differently than we do. He doesn't use the old blueprints. He starts with the heart. Before he restores what you've lost, he restores who you are. Before he brings back what was taken, he brings back what was missing. Your peace, your purity, your trust. That's the beauty of a God who waits. He doesn't just stand beyond the wreckage. He walks into it. He gathers the pieces with tenderness, knowing exactly how they fit. He doesn't discard what's broken. He redeems it. Every crack becomes a channel for his light. Every scar becomes proof of his patience. One day when you look back, you'll realize that what felt like ruin was actually renewal. You'll see how necessary the breaking was, how it stripped away what was false, how it revealed what could never be shaken. And you'll thank him not for the pain, but for the presence that met you in it. Because you'll know, he never left, he never turned away. He was there in the fall, in the silence, in the waiting. And when you finally came home, he didn't meet you with wrath, but with welcome. There's a sacred peace that comes when you understand this, that the God who waits beyond the wreckage is not the God of disappointment, but of restoration. He doesn't demand repayment, he gives redemption. He doesn't ask you to rebuild what was, he invites you to begin again. And in that beginning, you'll find freedom, you'll find rest. You'll find that grace was never lost, it was simply waiting for you to stop running. And when you finally do, you'll hear it. Not as a shout, not as a command, but as a whisper that feels like home. Welcome back, child. You were never too far. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come easily, the kind that doesn't arrive through answered prayers or perfect timing, but through exhaustion. The kind that comes when you fought long enough, cried long enough, tried long enough, and finally whisper, I can't do this anymore. It's strange how that moment, the one that feels like defeat, is often the beginning of true peace. You see, peace doesn't come when life calms down. It comes when your spirit bows down. When you stop demanding answers and start trusting the one who never needed your understanding to begin with. It's found in that stillness that follows surrender. Not the absence of struggle, but the quiet acknowledgement that God is still God, even when nothing makes sense. You've spent so much of your life striving, haven't you? Trying to make things work, trying to prove yourself worthy, trying to hold together what was already falling apart. You've mistaken control for peace, believing that if you could just fix it, just manage it, just keep it from collapsing, you'd finally rest. But control never brings peace. It only deepens the fear of losing it. There's a weight that lifts when you finally surrender. Not because the circumstances change, but because you do. The battle doesn't end outside of you. It ends within you. Surrender doesn't mean you've lost faith. It means your faith has grown strong enough to stop fighting. It's the moment when you realize you were never meant to carry what only God can hold. True peace is born in that place. The hollow space between letting go and being held. It's not the peace the world talks about, the kind that depends on outcomes. It's the kind that stays even when the outcomes break your heart. It's the peace that makes no sense, yet somehow feels more real than the pain that came before it. You'll know you've stepped into God's will not when everything works, but when your heart finally rests. When the need to control gives way to quiet trust. When you can sit in uncertainty and still feel safe. That's what surrender does. It transforms chaos into clarity, not by changing the storm, but by calming your soul within it. But surrender isn't easy. It's not a moment of triumph. It's a process of dying. Dying to pride, to plans, to expectations. You'll feel it in your chest, that ache that comes from releasing something you've held too tightly for too long. You'll want to reach for it again to fix it, to make it right. But every time you do, peace slips further away. God doesn't ask you to surrender because he wants to see you weak. He asks because he wants to make you whole. He knows peace can't coexist with striving. He knows that as long as your hands are full of control, they'll never be open to receive grace. And so he waits patiently until you stop fighting the waves and finally let him carry you through them. When you do, you'll find that peace doesn't rush in. It unfolds slowly like dawn. It begins as a whisper in the dark, then grows into a quiet knowing, I'm not alone. It doesn't erase the pain, but it redeems it. It doesn't answer every question, but it silences the fear behind them. This is the peace Jesus spoke of. Not as the world gives, but as heaven breathes. There will still be storms. Life won't suddenly make sense. People will still fail you, doors will still close, and nights will still come. But something inside will shift. You'll start to see beauty even in the breaking, purpose even in the waiting. You'll find that you no longer need to understand everything to trust him with anything. Peace after surrender isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It comes in small moments. The first morning you wake up and don't feel afraid. The first prayer that no longer feels like begging. The first breath that feels lighter than the one before. It's quiet, but it's constant. And once it arrives, you realize it was never gone. You were just too busy wrestling to feel it. This peace doesn't depend on perfect faith. It doesn't require that you stop grieving or stop hoping. It simply asks that you stop resisting, that you let God be who he has always been, faithful. He doesn't need your perfection. He needs your permission to be your peace. When you finally stop striving, you'll notice how everything around you starts to soften. The same circumstances that once tormented you will lose their power. The people who wounded you will no longer hold your joy hostage. The unknowns will no longer feel like threats but invitations. Because peace after surrender is not about control, it's about trust. You'll learn to say, I don't know what's next, but I know who's with me. And in that simple confession, fear loses its voice. You'll begin to rest, not because the road is easy, but because you finally believe that even in the hard you are held. It's strange how peace and surrender always come hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other. The world tells you peace comes through resolution. Heaven tells you it comes through relinquishing. The world says hold tighter. Heaven says release. Choose the latter, find the kind of stillness that nothing can steal. And one day as you look back, you'll realize that the moment you thought you were losing everything was the moment you gained what mattered most. A quiet heart, a steady soul, a peace that can't be shaken. You'll understand that surrender was not weakness, it was worship. It was the moment you stopped fighting for control and started living in trust. Peace doesn't come when life calms down. It comes when your spirit bows down, when striving ceases and faith begins to breathe. And once you've tasted that kind of peace, you'll never want to go back to the noise again. Harzas? Because now you know peace isn't found in the absence of storms. It's found in the presence of God. And He was waiting for your surrender all along. There are moments when heaven goes quiet. Not because God has stopped speaking, but because He has already spoken. You know what He's asking. You felt it in the unrest that won't settle, in the dreams that no longer breathe, and the walls that feel tighter with every passing day. You keep waiting for a sign, a louder word, a clearer confirmation, but deep in your spirit, the message has never changed. God doesn't shout a too late. He whispers a now. That whisper is sacred. It's not a suggestion, it's a lifeline. It's God pulling you toward the edge of everything safe and familiar, asking you to trust that His arms are already waiting on the other side. The step He's asking you to take, that single act of courage, that quiet yes, that painful release, might be the one that saves your future. But obedience rarely feels like safety. It feels like standing on the edge of the unknown, heart pounding, faith trembling. It feels like walking away from what you can see into what you can only believe. You tell yourself you're waiting on timing, but often timing is waiting on you. Every moment you delay obedience, the noise of fear grows louder. Every hesitation gives doubt another foothold. Delayed obedience is not patience, it's rebellion wrapped in reasoning. You think you're buying time, but you're only losing it. God's invitation is always urgent, not because He's impatient, but because He knows what waiting costs you. Every time you resist the whisper, the heart grows duller to its sound. Every time you hesitate, the distance between His will and your peace widens. He asks you to step, not because He needs your movement, but because you need His mercy. That's the paradox of faith. God could carry you across the distance Himself, yet He invites you to walk it, because the walk is where you become who you were meant to be. The miracle isn't in the moving, it's in the trusting. It's in the moment your trembling heart chooses belief over fear. It doesn't matter what the step is. Maybe it's leaving what's become a prison. Maybe it's forgiving the one who broke you. Maybe it's returning to the place where you swore you'd never go again. Each act of obedience looks different, but the root is the same. Will you trust me more than your fear? Faith has never been comfortable. The steps that save your life will almost always hurt first. You'll question your discernment. You'll wonder if you misheard. You'll feel the weight of everything you're walking away from and wonder if you'll ever find your footing again. But the moment you step, truly step, you'll sense it. Heaven moves with you. For every step you take toward His will, heaven moves 1,000 steps toward you. The winds shift, the unseen begins to align. You won't notice it immediately, but you'll start to feel lighter. Not because the road is easy, but because obedience removes the chains of comfort disguised as stability. Sometimes the step will cost you everything you thought you needed. Sometimes it will lead you into wilderness before it leads you to promise. But God never wastes a step. Every act of faith becomes a bridge, carrying you over the chaos you didn't even see coming. The step you fear the most is often the one that prevents the fall you'll never have to endure. You might look back one day and realize that the step you almost didn't take was the one that saved you. Saved your mind from bitterness. Saved your heart from hardening. Saved your purpose from being buried beneath compromise. God's instructions are never random. They are rescue missions in disguise. But obedience demands immediacy. The longer you wait, the heavier the decision becomes. Fear multiplies in delay. Regret grows in hesitation. And yet, every time you move, even trembling, even unsure, grace meets you mid-step. You'll find that you were never walking alone. The ground may look uncertain, but under each footfall lies the faithfulness of God. It's easy to say you trust Him when the outcome is clear. But true trust begins when there are no guarantees, when the step leads into fog, and all you have is His voice. That's where faith is forged. Not in comfort, but in risk. Not in clarity, but in courage. You may think, what if I'm wrong? But what if you're right? What if that step, that risk, that surrender is the one thing standing between who you are and who you were created to become? What if obedience isn't just about the future? What if it's about saving your soul now from the slow decay of fear, the dull ache of disobedience, the emptiness of standing still when God says move? You don't need to see the whole path. You don't even need to see the next mile. All you need is enough faith to lift your foot. Because faith doesn't show you where you'll land, it shows you who will catch you. And when you finally do it, when you take that trembling step into obedience, something shifts. You'll feel the chains fall off. You'll feel the air change. You'll sense the nearness of God in ways you never did while you were standing still. Because motion toward His will always draws you closer to His heart. You will stumble. You will second guess. But keep stepping. Keep trusting. Heaven moves at the speed of obedience. And though the world may never understand, heaven never forgets the courage it takes to say yes when everything in you wants to say later. One day you'll stand on the other side of this step and realize that God wasn't testing your strength, He was revealing His. He wasn't asking for perfection, He was asking for faith. And that one small act of obedience, the one you almost didn't take, became the turning point of your entire life. Because that's how He works. Quietly, patiently, calling you forward with a whisper, not a shout. Never condemning you for hesitating, only inviting you again to trust. Always waiting at the edge of your fear with mercy, saying softly, now, and when you finally move, you'll discover what was true all along. Obedience doesn't just change your direction, it saves your life.